people of New Delhi who've managed in the last 6 months, as I understand it, to experience both the hottest week, the coldest week, and the wettest week in any recorded history. Remember that Paris was always meant to be the floor.
Correct.
We were always meant to meet those obligations and then extend the ambition once we had done so.
So behind us is Samantha Power, who seems to be playing cricket with the girls here. Samantha is the administrator with USAID, which is United States Agency for International Development. And Samantha was also the permanent representative of the US to the UN from 2013 to 17. During her time at the UN, she played a critical role in sort of rallying the countries to ratify the Paris Agreement. So we're going to talk to her and ask her what is all of this and why is she here? Hi Samantha, Sadhika here. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Of course, I'm glad to be here.
What is all of this? I see you playing cricket with the kids.
This is kids, girls, playing one of the most popular sports in the world.
And the t-shirts say USAID. So could you tell us a little about that?
Well, this is a program that we support in order to strengthen girls' empowerment, and sport is a big piece of it, which is a huge part of my story back in my life as an immigrant in America. So I wanted to come out and see it up close.
Lovely. So can I steal you from them for a second?
You can steal them.
Okay.
Steal me.
So Samantha, the one most important question that is very relevant right now in the sort of global politics of climate change, especially for developing countries, is climate finance. Especially for countries like India, and you played a critical role in the Paris Agreement also. So how do you feel about that? Do you think the US sort of needs to increase the sort of pledge or allocation for climate finance, especially for countries like India?
The short answer is yes, I do. And so does President Biden. And he has made unprecedented requests of Congress in order to dramatically increase climate finance. We will see a major increase in our global climate finance in this coming year. More climate finance than ever before has been appropriated. But there's still a big gap between what President Biden wants to do and where our Congress is. You know, we have politics and
how do you and he's also facing a lot of heat from the Congress currently. So how do you think that will be then sorted?
Well, honestly, climate change is making its presence felt in every one of our communities. I mean, I was just talking to my son who was coming off a tennis court, and it was 100 degrees on the tennis court, and the coaches made people sit out. That's a kind of a pale version or a mild version of what is afflicting farmers, what is afflicting the United Kingdom with temperatures of 40 degrees, what is afflicting the people of New Delhi who've managed in the last 6 months, as I understand it, to experience both the hottest week, the coldest week, and the wettest week in any recorded history. So this fact that it is with us, that it is ubiquitous, that the effects are just being felt right now, in some sense, sooner than some scientists even predicted, I think really makes it untenable for political opposition of the kind that has afflicted this agenda in the United States. Now, the challenge, of course, is that more resources, it means more money, and that means, you know, taking money out of something else or taking on more debt. And so that's where people's priors and whether they believe that, you know, debt spending is bad for the economy or good for the economy, or whether they want to trust science or not, and I'm sad that there's even a debate about that, kind of come in, and that's where again we've been blocked.
Precisely. So that actually also takes me to my next question of sorts. India is one of the 5th most vulnerable countries to climate change in the world. And we've been seeing these extreme weather events with greater frequency now, increasingly so. A northeastern state of Assam saw the worst floods in 122 years. And increasingly, we're going to see more and more of these events. This is also what the IPCC tells us. So in a situation like that, where we're seeing unprecedented sort of loss of life and livelihoods, how important do you think is the payment of loss and damages to a country like India and other developing countries?
Well, again, we're invested in adaptation finance, and that is the approach. We understand, how and have heard very loudly, of course, from developing countries who feel like, wait, this isn't fair. You all emitted in these ways, and we're the ones paying the price for that. I felt that way as a U.S. official just being in Somalia. You know, again, I definitely, am conscious as a U.S. official of all of the history, and that is why the U.S. wants to be a leader in funding the Green Climate Fund It wants to be a leader in, with India in fueling private sector investment to cap at least the warming, beyond what the damage it's already causing. And we want to be a leader in adaptation. And I do think, again, you're going to see increased investments every year. President Biden has committed to something called the Prepare Initiative, which is an adaptation initiative, that should be up to $3 billion a year. Again, there's a gap between that and what we know the world needs. But that's where the World Bank and other large multilateral development banks and others can also chip in. One thing we've seen, if I may, is that the private sector is really voting with its feet on climate mitigation. We see it, of course, here in India, with the number of companies that are involved in renewables. We're not seeing the private sector show as much interest in adaptation. I think they view it as kind of almost charity, but it need not be charity, right? There are ways for insurance companies to also build into their business model these kinds of investments where we can see public and private partnership helping countries adapt. Same in the farming industry. There's profit to be made in the agricultural sector. If you get drought-resistant seeds and heat-resistant seeds to farmers, if they are using fertilizer in a more directed and efficient way, they're going to have higher yields and people are going to make more money. And so it really is going to need to be public sector and private sector together. And I think we haven't made as much progress in that domain as I think we need.
Right, absolutely. And I also think that we don't have much time left, so I'm just going to quickly ask you my last question. India's net zero target is 2070. For the US, it's 2050. And in India, we're also trying to sort of move away from traditional sources of energy like coal to now a lot of other things. And in the future, the biggest challenge that we see as a country is going to be that of just transition. So how do you think the USAID can sort of assist India and the global community can sort of come together to ensure that this transition is not as unfair to a large part of the community then?
Well, one of the reasons that we have struggled domestically in the United States to move in an even more aggressive way toward net zero, because I think President Biden wants to get there sooner. None of us can afford, some of these longer timelines that we're all on, but is sort of, it may not be framed as just transition in the United States, but it's a feeling that there will be winners and there will be losers, people left behind. Correct. For sure. And so, just as we are grappling with domestically, we have to find a way to transition people who are making their livelihoods, for example, in the coal industry, to actually find jobs in clean energy. During the transition period, there need to be social safety nets of a kind that too often have been lacking when people make abrupt transitions. That said, we don't have time really to spare as we develop these kinds of buffers so as to ensure that we can simultaneously grow jobs, green jobs, and look out for people who are not only transitioning because of the move to renewables. That's where everybody's focusing. Just transition is in that area. But we have to have just transition and adaptation as well.
Correct. So then in the Biden administration now, will we see aggressive emission reduction plans from the US?
Well, I think you are seeing that. I mean, you've seen, for example, executive orders in that direction. I also would note, again, that even though President Trump, President Biden's predecessor, moved away from the Paris Agreement, of course, famously questioned the science of climate change, mayors and companies and states, including California, which is, is an emitter, larger than many countries, and also now is a emissions reducer on an accelerated timeline more than most countries. They proceeded full speed ahead. And so, what we need to do is make up for lost time. But more than that, remember that Paris was always meant to be the floor. Correct. We were always meant to meet those obligations and then extend the ambition once we had done so. The private sector recognizes that, and that's why, even large American car companies are all transitioning in some fashion, to renewables, to electric cars and so forth. But, we need all of our societies to come together. And in order for that to happen, I think you're absolutely right that we have to reconcile our economic objectives, looking out particularly for people who are living at or beneath the poverty line, with these climate objectives, but bearing in mind that climate change is going to destroy so many livelihoods. So the case for emissions reduction is an economic case. It is a case actually about justice as well, and trying to protect as many livelihoods as we can.